It being just past 8:30 a.m., I'll go ahead and call the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors budget session to order for October 29th, 2019. If all members could please press their attend buttons and silence any cell phones. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Locke. If you could please all stand and face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now the invocation by Supervisor Locke.
Bless us as we gather for this meeting. Guide our minds and hearts so that we will work for the good of the community. Teach us to be generous in our outlook, courageous in the face of difficulty, and wise in our decisions during the 2020 budget meeting for Winnebago County. Amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Locke. Next item on the agenda is a motion to adopt the agenda for today. I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move to reconvene our budget process.
There's a motion to reconvene and adopt the agenda for today. There was a motion in a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item, and that's an opportunity for anyone from the public to speak on any item on the agenda this morning, or any item under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone who wishes to speak this morning? Is there anyone who wishes to speak? I'll say one more time, is there anyone who wishes to speak on anything on the agenda today or anything under county jurisdiction? We'll go ahead and close that portion of the meeting and move on to the next item, and that's communications and petitions. I don't believe there are any, so we will move right back to reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Anything else from any reports from committees, commissions, and boards? Seeing none, we'll move right down to the county board chairman's report. So first for today, Supervisor Lenz, Supervisor Robel, Supervisor Powers, Supervisor Youngquist, all asked to be excused for today. Also, a quick reminder again that it's County Government Day, so the high school students will be with us this afternoon. Quick reminder of the luncheon at noon today at the American Legion. You can purchase tickets. They're $6.50 from the clerk as well. And so that concludes my report. So we'll move right back to the budget presentation by Executive Harris. Executive Harris?
The next item is the district attorney.
Correct.
On page 213, there's the department staffing. 17 full-time staff is in the budget, the same as last year. There have, however, been 2 assistant district attorneys that are going to be added by the state. And just a reminder, in the DA's office, the district attorney and the assistant DAs are state employees. The county budget is for the support employees that are paid for by the county. There's a summary of significant changes on page 214.
Any questions in regards to the district attorney's budget? First call on Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on that there's going to be 2 new attorneys coming in. Are they going to need more support staff?
They have indicated, and I'll let the DA comment, but they have suggested no.
Please go right ahead.
Thank you. So the answer is mostly no. And let me explain that. Over the last few years, we've been creating more efficiencies in our office, including going paperless, and with e-referral. We are currently staffed so that we have 1 legal assistant for every 2 attorneys. And we had a paralegal position come open. We decided not to fill that position to see if we could get by without it, with the efficiencies we've created. And then in that time frame, two additional attorneys were added, so we're going to fill that paralegal position. So it's actually going to be the same number. We're not adding anything to the table of organization. It's a position that we had originally hoped we'd be able to eliminate to save some money. We're going to have to fill the position again. We're working on that now. I think it goes to P&F in November. So we won't add anybody. We're going to make it work with the staff that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions. One refers to page 219, under operating expenses. The item would be small equipment, 53255. There was a request for $10,800, but the executive only approved $5,500. Could you share with us what that is and whether you really need the other 3,300?
Certainly. So that's for replacing the desk chairs throughout the office. And when we met with the county executive, he suggested, or he thought that it would be better for the budget if we did that over the course of 2 years, which is functional. That's okay.
And the second question that I have, Mr. Chairman, where in the budget is the new proposed diversion programs, both the revenue and the expenses for those?
I'm sorry, which new programs?
Well, it has been talked about in committee and outside of the formal boardroom that you're working on a set of new diversion programs requiring physical space, requiring
Okay.
a grant that you received from a national organization. And I'd like to inquire, because I'm not an accountant, I'd like to inquire where in the budget are we accounting for those revenues and those expenses?
Okay, so two different parts there. The first one is the grant, and I think the board's aware we received a grant in conjunction with New York University to enable us to administer medication-assisted treatment to address the opioid epidemic. And the partnership with New York University includes them researching or providing research support and analysis of the strategies that we develop and implement. That money is reflected. Do you know the? Sorry, I'm looking at the significant changes page on 214. The Wisconsin Department of Justice, is it the first one? That grant of $288,743. The grant's $900,000, but it's over 3 years and includes a research component. And so the grant changes are reflected there. And then the expense changes impact on levy, the regular pay for the position and the health insurance are all listed on that same page, I guess. So they're offsetting costs as well as some equipment costs, including phone, things of that sort. So all of that grant money is reflected in that way, I guess. And then the Justice Support Services model that we've been talking about, but that's going to be a budget amendment proposal, and so it's not reflected in this budget. So I guess I'm not sure how to answer that question. I can give you approximately what it's going to cost to do it, but it's not really a new program. The Justice Support Services model is, the idea is to bring services together so that we can increase the number of people that we're providing services to. So the increase in cost is going to be fairly minimal, and it's going to allow us to expand the programming that we have now from a few hundred people to a couple thousand people. So the idea is to address more individuals with the mental health needs, AODA issues. A lot of the services that we provide now, we're trying to figure out how to exponentially increase those by consolidating services. So it's not so much about adding new programs, it's about improving and increasing our capacity by consolidating resources.
You know, this is an unusual circumstance, but I feel I have to have some input on this because this is my only chance to talk about it. I think the idea is a noble one, and as I understand it, either there'll be deferred sentencing or suspended sentences, something to encourage people to go in the program. And the concept was that you'd have in one location a variety of social services available to people to meet what might be the underlying causes. And I think it's worth giving this some sort of try. But I think the DA's concept included a large number of people from different social services providing different kinds of services. And by the way, we've tried this before, not in the exact form, but we did day reporting, and we discontinued it because there was a total lack of participation. So there needs to be some sort of additional incentive and pressure than what there was under the day reporting to get someone to participate. I think we were in the single digits with the day reporting, which was a very similar concept on the social service side of it. But what I'm concerned about is there's a presumption that the social services will provide personnel on our site without charge. I took the liberty of calling AVCAP and Workforce Development, and they had no anticipation that they would provide services at their expense. And for instance, with AVCAP, we have 2 poverty caseworkers that are working at their capacity off-site, but the county pays for that. We contract for it. So the concern I have with this program is we don't know if we're actually going to get those people from the social services to work at our location. And history would tell us that they will expect us to contract with them and pay for those services. So I think you're talking about a very substantial expense, one that's not been reflected in the amendment that I know you're going to see later. I think the concept has some merit. I would like to see us give it some chance, but I think it's likely to start on a very small scale and may initially only have human service department workers on site, possibly 2. So my vision of this is a much smaller test program that could in fact grow into the DA's vision over time. But I would be surprised if there's a significant participation the first year or a significant need for space. And so my recommendation would be we give the program a chance, probably on the lower level where the IT offices used to be. But that entire lower level of the building currently only has the part-time coroner secretary in it. And she could easily be moved over to the administration building where the death records are now kept. So that would be my comment on that. And I certainly hope you ask the sheriff about this. He has a great deal of knowledge on what's being proposed, as well as the day reporting program that we had and then terminated not long ago.
Thank you. District Attorney, you have a comment? Please go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I have to disagree with most of what the county exec said. This is a work group that has been working on this for a year. Now, this is being proposed as an alternative to the traditional way of doing business, okay? We started this group in October of 2018. The jail population at that time was about 322 people, average daily population. The sheriff has indicated that when we go above 310, we need to start looking at adding jail space. Beginning in October, probation and parole, mental health providers, the Department of Human Services, the Health Department, the District Attorney's Office, the Judiciary, a court commissioner, and various other professionals, Forward Services Corp., I can't really remember. I think there's about 15 to 20 different groups who have been working on this project. We started meeting. We lowered that jail population to 254 by doing exactly what the county executive is suggesting, trying different things, experimenting with different things. The problem is that this is phenomenally labor intensive because nobody is together. Nobody can share information. This is taking a lot of time and energy to do it. Our day report center, I'm not really sure what happened with it, but it didn't work. But if you want to see a justice support services model that works, La Crosse County has been very successfully running one for several years. And so we've gone to La Crosse County twice. What we were told is that we won't be able to do this without the support of the county executive. And that's because we need him to make space available. We need you guys to give us resources. And so this can't happen without all of us coming together and rethinking how we administer criminal justice in this county. And that's what we're asking for, is an experiment to see if we can change the way we do business. That jail population, by the way, after our group broke up, because we had nowhere else to go, is, I believe, now at 284. So it dropped by 68 people. It's come back up 30, and we are currently 26 people away from where we have to start looking at a jail expansion again. We're getting 2 more attorneys in the office, which is a 20% increase in prosecutorial staffing. That means we need resources to send people to. We're going to come to a crossroads where we have to try something different, or we have to expand the jail. I don't know that this concept will solve all of our problems. I don't know that it'll keep us from ever having to build more jail space. But I think it's at least something that we should consider trying. We already have 7 people who have committed to being part of this. 7 bodies. They will not fit in the 4 offices in the basement. We can make space available for Corporation Counsel on the 3rd floor of the Oren King building, giving their attorneys 5 offices for the 3 of them, and enough office space for all of their paralegals to have similar space to what the paralegals in the district attorney's office has. I know that they don't want to move, and none of us can make them move, but I think this is something that we have to give some serious consideration to. Somebody in the last county board meeting indicated, right now we have an opportunity to try something, but in the future we might not. We might run out of space, and we might have to just simply build more jail space and push the problem down the road for future generations. I believe that we can make this work. I've seen it work in other counties, and we have a lot of support for this. A lot of people are working very hard to make this happen. I'm not as pessimistic as county exec. I think this is something we should give a try to. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Eisen, anything further?
Yeah, what space is available within the courthouse? Mr. Elder around?
The 5th floor, there's space on the 5th floor of the courthouse. There's the lower level where we used to have IT offices in Oren King. And there's a lot of space over in the administrative building. But the DA wants it to be in his building because they have a different computer system that gives access, I believe, to state criminal records.
Well, my question would be, could the Corporation Counsel have sufficient space within the courthouse?
That was talked about. It was felt that having to go through the metal detectors and come into the courthouse might have a chilling effect on, at least that's what the DA has suggested, and I accept that, might have a chilling effect on these individuals that have suspended sentences to come in. But there's another issue too, and that's, I need you to ask people in law enforcement what has caused this drop in people in the jail. Is it because of an alternatives program, which I do not believe has actually started, or is it because of a lack of prosecutions? And those are uncomfortable questions, but questions that have to be asked.
Anything further, Supervisor? No?
Well, I think the executive danced around my question. My question was, is there sufficient space for the Corporation Council to be located within the courthouse?
Not finished space, you could remodel and do that. But I think there probably is space that could, with sufficient investment, be remodeled. But it's premature to disrupt corporate counsel's offices for a program that's not up and running. It's possible that we would do that at some future date if the program actually starts to work, if we actually get not-for-profit people assigned to that location. Our past experience is that they will expect us to contract for that work. They will not do it free of charge.
Well, it looks like we have a situation where there's a need to coordinate the intra-departmental needs, and just as we transitioned the county clerk, the county treasurer, and others to the administration building, we would also need to assess what's going on here and consider that issue, just as we considered the tunnel going from Warren King to the courthouse. So you may be very correct, Mr. Harris, that there's a lot of work to be done, and it may not be a 2020 budget done deal, but it's certainly worth pursuing. And being privileged to serve on the Safe Streets Initiative, I know and I do, from my perspective, hold the district attorney's innovations and various diversion programs, which I have enumerated to the board in the past, and I think that there is a good correlation between the jail population and the work that the DA has done in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. District Attorney, did you have one other comment? Then I'm going to move to Supervisor Defferting, but please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just briefly, the problem that we have here is that we're at an impasse. We can't get the space, so we can't consolidate the services, which is at the heart of the program. So the proposal that we not consolidate the services and try to consolidate services without the physical ability to consolidate services, if that's making your head spin, it's because it doesn't work. You can't consolidate services without consolidating services. So if we can't get the space, we can't try it. It's not a matter of let's try it on a small scale. We do these things in this community already. We provide mental health services. We provide AODA services. We just don't provide them efficiently or as effectively as we could, and we're trying to maximize that. So please understand the impasse that this sort of creates. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney. Next speaker, Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I go into my spiel here, I almost entertain a notion where we settle all of our budget issues by having a snowball fight outside of the courthouse, but I thought better of it. I was recently at a presentation with State Assembly Rep Evan Goyke from Milwaukee. He's recently promoting an idea right now. I thought it was a bill, but it's actually just an idea, simply titled No Vacancy. And it's in regards to how we can change criminal justice on the state level. And one of the things that's included in this is that the state would start increasing their treatment and diversion programs throughout the state. So, and this was it went on for about an hour and a half, and it was a panel of 4 people that have been affected by the criminal justice system, Representative Goyke, but we also had somebody from Americans for Prosperity that was there. It was really interesting to see bipartisan support for what was ultimately a statewide issue, talking about how we can change criminal justice here in the state of Wisconsin. So a lot of these diversion programs that we're talking about, there is stuff that's going on in the county, like for instance drug court, but the state is going to be looking into changing how we view criminal justice, and we're going to be and there likely will be increasing treatment and diversion programs on the state level too, and the county needs to accommodate that as well. We're at the pinnacle of what we could see a possible complete and total sea change on how we view criminal justice. Instead of just simply arresting and incarcerating, we are treating them and putting them on a path to contribute back to society. I did speak with Sheriff Motz early into the year, and I wanted to see how everything. I wanted to listen to his side of things, and I know that our jail population has decreased a little bit over time, but he did ask me the question, where are these people now? And I didn't quite understand what that question was. It took me some time to think about that. But the problem is that we have a tendency to just release back into the community and just say sayonara. And they're not receiving any pretrial services. They're not receiving any services at all. And they're just simply sent back into the street. So what we are intending to do here is that these people, instead of just simply either not being charged and sent back out on the street, they're receiving pretrial services, they're receiving a treatment right away. When I went to La Crosse at to see their Justice Support Service Center there, one of the benefits of it is that they were very close to the district attorney's office. They were very close to the Department of Health and Human Services. It was all consolidated within 2 blocks. We don't have that luxury here in Winnebago County. We have buildings all over. We definitely need a place where we can coordinate those to go to the right, those diversion candidates to go to the right people, to go to the right buildings, to see the right people, do that whole practice of warm handoffs where we're walking them to our services and coordinating them correctly. Because it's pretty often that I do get a lot of questions of where do I go for this, where do I go for that. That's where these case managers that I've been working with Dr. Topol on that's where they will have assistance with. That's where their benefit will be. So we do have, there is space in the basement of the Orrin King building, but it's going to require a lot of retrofitting, or it will require a lot of remodeling. If you go down there, it's not very accommodating. And so we will probably have to remove some walls, and we're going to have to completely rearrange a lot of things. And then there's going to be additional security issues because of that tunnel to the courthouse. So if we're going to bring it down there, we're going to have a lot more traffic down there. It's going to require a lot more money for that. We have to keep in mind that what started this is that we were looking at possibly expanding the jail. And that was like $17 million, maybe more, maybe less, but it was a lot of money. And so we're looking at what could possibly be, what was it, $200,000 compared to $17 million to expand our jail. And not only that, but we are bringing people back to being contributing members of society, and that they become tax-paying citizens. They are reconnected to the community. And that is what's incredibly vital to this, is that they are being reconnected back to the community, finding that sense of belonging. And that's the best way to reduce recidivism. So this is something that I think that we can certainly find ways that we could mediate something with Corporation Counsel. We don't necessarily have to remove her from where she is. I think we could probably work out shared space. Some of those rooms may not be used all the time, so we could work something out there. But the thing of it is that that main floor of the Orrin King building is just simply ideal. When I spoke with Representative Goyke myself, he was a former prosecuting attorney, so he knows how the criminal justice system works. He kind of jokes saying that he's a recovering prosecuting attorney. But I explained to him what I would like to do, and he was like, that's exactly what we need to do. That's exactly what the whole state needs to do, is simply check out of the district attorney's office, go down one floor, and start receiving services right away. And that's one of the main things that we can do to avoid recidivism. If otherwise, it's just simply arrest and charge, arrest and charge, arrest and charge. We need to make a change now. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lefferty. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me address the grant on page 214. That's right under revenue changes, impact on levy. My question is for the district attorney. My experience is that when you apply for a grant, there are conditions applied to that application and approval of the grant. The parameters of it might be you can use the money for labor, you can use the money for facilities or space, etc. So if you could just, Mr. District Attorney, define for the board what the parameters of that grant are.
Certainly. So the grant is, most of the money is intended to go to the medication to help people overcome opioid addiction. The Vivitrol shots, I believe, are about $1,200 a shot, and so it's very expensive, and it keeps a lot of people from being able to have access to them.
Can you mention where that would be administrated?
The physical location, I'm not positive. It would be a combination of Hometown Pharmacy, I believe, would be assisting with this. And I'm sorry, the program coordinator isn't here for it. There's a halftime program coordinator who's establishing the program.
Who's actually giving the shot? That's my question.
Pharmacist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the idea is to develop a program to try to help people overcome opioid addiction, including the medication to help them overcome the withdrawal effects and the cravings, and see if we can put that together with treatment and reduce the opioid problem. So we have a grant-funded half-time program coordinator who for 3 years is going to establish the program, and then the program just gets absorbed into all of the other programs administered by the DA's office and DHS. And then the last part of it is that it's studied. So all of the data has to be collected and turned over to New York University, where they're going to keep tabs on everything, and then they'll produce a study to see what the impact of the strategy that we come up with. There's several sites around the country that were given these grants, and the idea is they want everybody to come up with their own solution, and they want to test them. So basically, it's a way to have a lot of people test them, and Winnebago County was selected as one of the counties to develop a way to try to address the issue, research it, and then put it in with everybody else so we can see around the country which programs are more or less effective.
Okay, so there's no money within the grant to provide for facilities.
That's correct.
That obligation would be ours if we accept the program and the initiative that the district attorney is presenting. I think that should be our, if we as a board majority decide this program is viable, then we need to pursue it and provide him with the facilities he's requesting. Simple question, correct?
Yeah.
But a complex answer. So I think that's basically the crux of this, is how are we going to accomplish that? If that's the desire of the board. Your job is to figure out how to make it work, right?
Yes,
Yes.
the board can set broad policy, and then I try to implement it.
Yes.
The details of implementation is solely within my job description. And what I'm suggesting is that you should start this program in the lower level of Orrin King. There's plenty of space down there. We can move the coroner's office to another location that might even be more appropriate for them. And we can let this program start. But there's no memos of understanding with any of the social service agencies that will provide this service. When we did the day reporting, I think it was something like $200,000. And again, you need to talk to the sheriff. The intent of that program was to connect these people with the social services. And even then, I think the judges were sentencing the people to that program or directing the people to that program. But the participation, even with that, was extremely low. We're talking single digits. And that's why the program was ended. And I believe the cost of that program was over $200,000. I know there's an amendment coming forward for over $200,000 to start this program up. And the staffing is primarily coming from 2 human service workers. And by the way, all of the alternative programs are largely staffed by human services. The drug courts, human service people involved. Safe Streets, human service people involved.
Isn't that a matter of assignment?
Well-
If Health and Human Services got 2 social workers, would that be the correct term?
Yes, and
He simply would assign them to this program. They're already being paid. He would simply assign them to this program.
no, and initially he offered half-time from 2 workers towards this program. The DA wanted more, so he's going to add 2 contract employees, but those have to be funded somehow. And unless these social service agencies place their people within this program at their expense, either they'll be off-site or we'll probably have to contract for that. Let's hope they'll do it at their expense, but that has not been our past experience.
So the option of the board is to provide the funding for those social workers.
And where do you get the kind of recurring funding that would be needed to hire 8 people?
That's up for us to figure out, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I'll give the district attorney an opportunity to address
Thank
your
you.
question too. I know he has a response to some of your questions.
Yeah,
Supervisor Farr.
thank you. So what we're looking at adding is 2 temporary positions. I think they're called project positions in the county through DHS. The other positions already exist, as Supervisor Farr indicated, and would just be allocated to this. But there's a few things being confused here, I think, and I want to try to provide some clarification. There was a day report center previously in Winnebago County. That day report center did fail. That day report center was laid out the way the county executive wants us to pilot this program, with very limited resources to try to get people to all of the different services instead of bringing the services here. If history repeats, which it sometimes does, I can save us all the time and energy and tell you that program will fail, because we already did it and it already failed. So what we're proposing is a different way of doing business, one that's based on successful models around the state that have worked. So I don't want to be set up for failure with sort of a little bait that we can try this in a way that will fail. It'll fail, okay? So it's not really an alternative. And the other thing that I keep hearing this, and I want to address it as well, is the district attorney's office does non-pros more cases today than we did a decade ago. And it's not synonymous with not taking action. And I explained this to the county exec in a 5-page letter, so I know he knows a lot of this. But what we do with these alternative and diversion programs is we solve the underlying issue. And one of the examples I gave him was operating after revocation. Somebody gets arrested for not having a driver's license, and we can put them in jail. We can prosecute them. It costs $60 a day, but we can do it. Or what we do in our office is we help them get a driver's license. And then they're out in the community with a driver's license, a job, the ability to get their kids to school. How many times do we do this each year? Currently, I think it's about 240. Now, when we get them a driver's license, we put a lot of effort in with a lot of our partners. 240 additional people each year licensed on the road means 240 cases are non-prossed. Now, there are going to be people who say that's a bad thing because we could have prosecuted them and thrown them in jail. But as was indicated earlier, we're sort of at a crossroads in the criminal justice system. How long are we going to keep throwing people in jail and not solving the problems? We non-pross far more cases today than we did a decade ago because our programming is proving to be successful. 2 of our programs have been studied. We've reduced domestic violence recidivism by 14%, drug recidivism by 17%. And we've got 35% of our revoked driver's licenses licensed again. Now, I take exception to somebody trying to categorize that as a failure. All of those cases end up in non-prosecutions when we successfully rehabilitate people. My hope is that we have more non-prosecutions going forward because we'll be solving more problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, I'll call on Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Warnke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought a lot about this last night, thanks to Bill Wingren back there. And just a refresher, I was a professional fundraiser, so we actually did several huge programs with the county as a partner during my tenure. But as I thought about this, there is a challenge when you get a large grant, so there's a lot of energy that gets put into developing the grant request and that sort of thing. And then there's the program rollout. And what I see here is a huge disconnect between those two things. We've got a potentially great idea, and yet, from my perspective on this board, we have not gotten any detail, because at some point you have to put together very detailed budgets. You have to have memorandums of understanding from your partners. That's just standard procedure. And I think we're totally out of order in terms of how this is coming to the board. And in fact, I was thinking about the old way of doing the airport issues, and this is kind of resurrecting those memories for me. But I think we have a potentially very good idea, but the actual work of putting together budgets, program plans, connecting with potential partners, I would have assumed that happened from the beginning, that those people would be involved in the planning of the project to begin with. It appears that, there may have been some conversations, but not. So I think, and I understand there's this budget pressure. It's confusing to me that knowing that the budget process was coming, that detail was not organized before now, and we're trying to do an end run to get things done. So, and perhaps we can put a placeholder in terms of, a budget for this project, so when they come in with their ducks in order, later in the year, we can act on it. But this is totally out of order, and we would not let any other program come in this way and get support. So I support what we're trying to do here. I think it's a great idea. We have to try new things, but it is a pilot program, and let's not get that out of focus or out of priority. So I don't know what we can do in terms of budget, but because I understand that pressure, and Christian wants to keep moving, but it has to be in order, and things have got to be spelled out and thought out and organized before we start bringing people in to get treatment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Sorshi. Next speaker, Supervisor Warnke, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
I'm all for this diversion type of program, and I think it's a great idea. But there's also another program that I feel is very much in need, and because I know of someone who I'm very close to and have been for 50 years, who I hear about all the time, and that is volunteers and community service. The example I'm talking about is the Salvation Army. They have an extremely hard time getting people to come over there and serve food and stuff like this. And there has got to be a lot of other areas that could use some help from community service. My question to the district attorney is, could you make this part of your program? And, you know, I know it's a good thing that you're getting them driver's license and everything, but it comes down to putting people back into society and seeing what the real life is about. Could you push for more community service and maybe somehow find out if someone needs help on a project that these people could help with? You have some thoughts on that?
Certainly. Yeah, community service is always tricky, and I know that that's one of the things through the drug court that they try to do a lot of. And one of the problems, so we don't arrange the community service. I'm speaking a little bit out of place here.
I know that.
But my understanding is that one of the challenges they have is that a lot of people who are looking for volunteers don't want volunteers that are in the criminal justice system. And so I think they sometimes run into placement issues. But I know that they do use community service for various programs. I'm just not sure how extensive it is and how they determine which organizations they'll work with. But perhaps DHS could shed a little more light on that.
Well, I mean, for example, I'm not talking about someone who got into a whole bunch of trouble and, you know, it's a very serious crime or something. I'm talking like for people who've been picked up for DUIs and for other, you know, other small misdemeanor or smaller types of charges. And, you know, you talk about you want to put these people back into society. Well, a lot of them don't know much about life to begin with because they've never experienced it. And it helps them in the long run as far as learning about life. So that's, I mean, I'm not blaming you. It's not your fault, but I would like to see some of this put into a diversion program.
Thank you. Yeah, and we do try to do it. I'm just not sure how extensively, but thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems that one of the key issues, besides not putting the cart before the horse, and I don't want to take away anything from Supervisor Shorsey's input, because I think that she has a very logical and very reasonable approach to this issue. But in the terms of finding funding within the new budget for 2020, I would like to point to $240,000 that I have proposed to reduce the levy for human services that would certainly provide a starter on recurring expenses to hire people to provide for 2020 remodeling and also to pay for the 2 temporary project positions. These expenses would fall upon the county board. So what I'm trying to say is that if you take issue and if you follow the dollars, they're there, people. You can have this program, but you have to have a reasonable plan, as Supervisor Shorsey shared with us, and have the will and desire to achieve that goal. And I think the district attorney has done a good service for the county and for the citizens of Winnebago County and the individuals that process through the justice system here. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Defferty.
Thank you. I think we should strive to help these people, but I think we are ignoring the root cause. And this, these programs are just Band-Aids. And the root cause is the lack of God. We have, our country was founded on God, and we have gone way away from that. And I think adding jailhouse ministries would be a good thing, or adding to it. I know they exist. But it's just going to keep continuing the way it is. We can fix things and Band-Aid it, but it's going to keep going down that slope. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to, reason why I decided to speak again is that I wanted to echo what Supervisor Warnke was talking about. And if this Justice Support Center comes to pass, if and when it does, and we go forward with creating case managers with the Department of Health and Human Services, one of the key elements that I would like to incorporate with this is to reconnect or to connect people to these charities and nonprofits throughout the county. We have plenty of charities and nonprofits within Winnebago County, and I think one of the key elements to reduce recidivism is to create a new sense of belonging with the community. And I do think that I met up with Marianne Radley at Reach Counseling. We have counseling services available within Winnebago County. We've got and so if and when this comes to pass, as my duty as supervisor, I will be seeing to it that we will be connecting people to these charities and nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Konecki.
I believe if the DA could have got this in the budget, it would be in the budget, but I don't think he had the support from the county exec to do it in the budget. So that's why last month he was here asking us to help him to get this. So I don't really see how we can not go forward with it. I mean, at least give it a try. I don't want to see the corporate council move. I don't want to remodel those offices for the DA and remodel the lower level of the Orrin King building for corporate council. I think if they can make the lower level of the Orrin King building work for them, and if there's some space on the first floor, that would be the way to go. And if this program really takes off and it's got a perfect success, we're tearing down that Williams building. There's not saying that we couldn't build a facility in the future in 5 or 10 years if we see a positive outcome of this. But if it's a matter of putting a few partitions up in the third or the basement on the Orrin King building and using some unutilized space in corporate council and $200,000, what do we have to lose? I mean, these people sit in jail at $70-some a day and they produce nothing for society. It's all a drain on the taxpayers. If they can get their driver's license back, get a job, and basically have a future, isn't that what we want? I mean, shouldn't we be promoting the success of the people, not how long we can incarcerate them?
I have to respond to that, though.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Anything further? And then please go ahead.
Yeah, I in no way have been an obstructionist to this in terms of funding. The first meeting was with the DA and with the Human Service Director, and we went round and round trying to find out what the DA wanted, what the DA's program was. The Human Service Director offered 2 part-time people. He wanted more, so now he's offering 2 contract employees. The DA has never asked for funding for anything additional. And my repeated inquiries as to how this was going to work, how it was going to be funded, were rebuffed. My questions about how is the jail population being reduced by a program before it started, we went round and round. I was told it was this program that was reducing the number of people in the jail, but was never given any explanation how that could occur before this program existed. We've never been requested for any money in this budget, and in fact, it was at my insistence when the DA wanted an amendment to produce to this group that it includes some funding for positions, because he was going to do it without any funding. He thought the human service area could just do it with excess capacity. He didn't realize that there would have to be funded positions in order to move forward. I want this to work. I want it to be a success. But don't expect me to support a program before I told what the program is or how it's going to work or any details. And I'm going to give an example because I think it proves a point. The DA came up here and in his first presentation, he told you the county could save money by taking people with mental health issues in the jail and sending them to Winnebago Mental Health. His intentions were good. He meant well. He assumed the state paid the cost of moving people to Winnebago Mental Health. We're billed over $1,000 a day for each person moved to Winnebago Health. The county has to pay for that. Next year, it's going to be $1,200 a day. If we, in fact, had moved an average of 3 people a day, in other words, had 3 people a day in Winnebago Mental Health versus the jail, the county would have to come up with more than $1 million. I'm not allowed to take additional levy. So all these things have to be done very carefully and with the understanding of what the trade-offs were. I think the DA is asking you to support a program, which I'm willing to try and let develop over time, but he's asking you to jump headlong into it before you know what it even is. So.
I see the district attorney in the back. He wants to comment on it. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And I clarified this issue for the county exec yesterday, but I'll clarify it again because he repeated the same misinformation. What we're trying to do is reduce, lower, bring down the number of people from our county who end up in Winnebago Mental Health to save us $1,200 a day by having alternative services and by helping people when they come out of Winnebago Mental Health and they're our responsibility. If we can connect them with services, do warm handoffs, we can hopefully keep them from ending up back in Winnebago Mental Health. Right now, they just walk out the door. When people come out of the jail, they come off of probation and parole, there are no services for a warm handoff. We're trying to get those people as well. So our goal has never been to try to pass expenses on to the state by sending people to Winnebago Mental Health. In fact, also as I explained to the county executive in my email to him yesterday, this work group has included Winnebago Mental Health. And one of the things that we've done to reduce the jail population is work with Winnebago Mental Health so that when their patients from other counties commit crimes against staff members, they're far less likely to come into our jail. We try to keep them at Winnebago Mental Health. We don't pay for that. The county that put them there pays for that. When they come to our jail, one of them had to have, I believe, more than one surgery because they were eating springs and things in the mattresses, which Winnebago County did have to pay for. So I want to clarify that point. There's nothing about this that is designed to try to put people in Winnebago Mental Health. This is to try to provide lower levels of service and reduce our expenses and keep people in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Supervisor Konecki, followed by Supervisor Gabbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've heard Sheriff Mott's name mentioned a few times in this discussion, taking out the dollars and cents. I asked Mr. Motts to give his opinion on Mr. Gossett's proposal.
Sheriff? Please go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we did, as the county exec stated, we had a day report which is very similar, I think, to what the district attorney is proposing. We ended that in 2011 because of the participation. We paid family services $230,000, roughly $230,000 a year to contract to have their employees come in and provide AODA, counseling, job search. They did urinalysis, many of the things, there was mental health, many of the things that the district attorney is talking about. And if I remember correctly, those were bond conditions. So the judge would say, well, I won't put you in jail, but you need to report to day report, and on these specific days, you need to meet with these people. And they provided that service. It was on Washington Street. And they rented the space for that program. It ended because we had either 4 or 5 individuals that were on the program. That was it. The success rate was extremely poor. I'm not saying that the DA's program doesn't have merit, and that if it's run differently, maybe we can have some success to that program. But I as the county exec, have concerns about what are those, who are those individuals, are the MOUs in place? Again, we paid to have those services provided. Are you going to have all of those individuals willing to give up their time to come to the office, wherever that is, and meet with these would-be inmates and work through their issues? We have a 24/7 drug program and alcohol program. This morning we have 103 on our alcohol program and 18 on our drug program. The alcohol program is relatively successful where we keep them sober, but the drug is much less. We have about a 16% what we would consider success rate, where they actively participate in the program, where they're actually giving us tests every other day, and where they may have missed one test or they had a positive test, but that's a very low rate. And that is based on, again, bond conditions. The judge orders them to the 24/7 drug program, and they face jail consequences. If this is a pre-charge, what are the consequences? When law enforcement encounters somebody who's on the DA's program, what do we do? How do we know they're on the program? Do they go back to the original charge? Those are the things that I think need to be answered and need to be part of that, so we all understand what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to go about it. There's a lot of unanswered questions and some concerns.
Thank you, Sheriff Motz. Anything further, Supervisor Konecki?
Well, when do we get those questions answered? Sheriff Moss, what if you could get some of those questions answered?
So you asked when will we get those questions answered? What if we get those questions answered? And I think there's some viability to what is being offered here. It's the one thing that 30 years of law enforcement has taught me is that somebody has to want to get better before you can have everything under one roof, but unless they want to change, they're not going to change. And you can make them go to all of these offices, you can try to improve their quality of life, but they have to want to change. And that's why the success rate is so poor with addiction. Again, there's some merit here, but there's a lot of unanswered questions.
Thank you, Sheriff Motz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Next speaker, Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Norton.
So I've put a lot of thought into this whole situation, and I am for diversion programs, because if you don't help people, sometimes they can't help themselves. But here's some facts for you. Calumet County just bid a new law enforcement center, budgeted at $35 million for 88 beds. I feel bad for the taxpayers in Calumet County, because that to me is a big expense for a small county. But it's the nature of what's going on here. I am not for putting someone out of sight, out of mind. And that's what sometimes happens to people, and we're all to blame for this. We don't know who's in the jail, but they're in the jail, so we feel better that at least they're incarcerated and they're off the streets. My concern is for the people that have mental health issues, and not putting them at the state, but getting them in a diversion program so we could at least try to help these people. I think everyone on this board, if you had a family situation or yourself, you'd like someone to help you. The bad thing about that is there's the environment. People get out of jail, They go back to the same environment, and I do believe, in my own opinion, that the drug situation is that. You help these people, they go back in their environment, and then they're back into doing heroin, cocaine, whatever it may be. We can't physically change that environment, but I believe every human being in this county has the right to have a chance. I understand that this might be a disorganized diversion program and a budgetary issue, but I certainly don't want to see a jail expansion for $17 million to incarcerate more people and keep them in jail so they can't be a productive human being out in society. I work at a place where we have a person who had an incident. They lost their driver's license, so they couldn't come to work. They couldn't pay the rent. They couldn't do anything with their family. They hired an attorney for a lot of money. They got their occupational license back with restrictions. He is back to work. He's working, getting a paycheck, paying his rent, buying food, and he's out in society. And he has learned his lesson. An older gentleman, but he's learned a lesson that this cost him a lot of money, but it was worth it for him to be able to be a useful member of society. I would like to see this program go ahead, and sooner than later, because there are a lot of people that could be served by it. We have two departments in this county, Human Services and the jail, the Justice Department. They eat most of our budget up, and it's the people that we're trying to help, but we seem to be missing some people in this system. So I understand the budgetary thing. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on that amendment, but we need to move forward and stop putting this off. The other thing I wanted to mention is we as a group of county board supervisors, we sit here and we look at this budget. We could have passed this budget last night because what we're talking about in this budget has already been set in stone. Every department put together their budget the best they could. We're hiring people. We're always talking about, do you need another person? Can we make this position work? And we seem to all get along and we do our due diligence on this. So I guess what I'm saying, I understand the space situation. I don't like to see that one department head has a space and doesn't want to give it up. I get that. I truly get that. This county has space to do this program. And contracted services, we're always contracting services for different departments for different things. So I don't think that should be a big issue. Unfortunately, I do see that it should have probably been in the budget at budget time, and that's concerning to me. But I don't want people to walk out of here today and say, well, we're going to work on that. As a county, we seem to always say we're going to work on that, and to get anything done, it takes years to work on something before we even get ahead. So I'm hoping today that we come to some agreement, and if you don't vote for that amendment when it comes time, I truly understand that, but to me, diversion programs can work. The final thing is you have one person that we are presently housing who had a criminal record, a sexual predator. After 1 year, that person is going to be released if he meets all the evals, and he will be released out into the community. There is someone that may be forgotten about because he's out of our care and he's back in society supposedly. He could be a repeat offender, he could not be a repeat offender, but we'll never know because he'll get lost. He will probably have to register wherever he lives, but it won't be our problem anymore. And what are we doing for that individual? Right now, we're housing them because we're mandated, but we have probably no program for him when he gets out. So that's concerning to me. So, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. I know the district attorney has some other comments. We're going to allow members of the board to speak, and then we'll come back around to him. So next speaker would be Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Lautenschläger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I slightly disagree with Supervisor Scorsese when, yes, this is a pilot or would be a pilot program for Winnebago County, but it's not a pilot program in the state because, as the district attorney has alluded to, La Crosse County has this program. And my question for you, District Attorney Goshert, is could you kind of answer the questions that the county executive brought up? How do they fund this program and continue funding to keep it going? this program, and maybe you could answer the questions the sheriff just had about some of the concerns he has. I'll let you answer that, but I do want to say I do appreciate your comments about when you responded to the county executive charge that you're not charging cases, and you explained to us what you weren't charging. I think these 200 an odd number of people who you didn't charge, who you rather get in a different program and have them out in the community being a productive citizen is a whole lot better for this county and the taxpayer than being in the county jail where it costs us $70 a day. So I thank you for that, and I think that's what we should do. We should be trying to find ways to make people more productive and not in jails or any institution. So I'll let you, if you can answer that question, that, you know, the concerns that the county executive says, how does La Crosse, a successful program, how do they have continual funding for their program? And maybe you can answer some of the questions the sheriff had.
District Attorney, please go ahead.
Thank you. Maybe County Board Supervisor Defferton could help me with how La Crosse funds this. The positions that we're primarily talking about here, the risk needs assessor that's necessary to do the compass evaluations and the domestic violence evaluations and the mental health evaluations, already works for the county, already an employee, would just be reallocated. The medication assisted treatment program coordinator already exists, is already funded, would just be reallocated. The diversion program coordinator would just be reallocated. So most of the positions would be reallocated. Groups like Forward Services Corp they're already funded by the state. They're already paid for. So they've already told me they'll put somebody here because this is the population they want to serve. So there's no funding there. And so the funding is going to be the space that the county already owns. And then with DHS, 2 project positions, essentially to do those warm handoffs that we talked about, because the counseling services already exist. The treatment provider that does the cognitive behavioral therapy for the district attorney's office is already paid for. They'd just be reallocated to this location. So we're mostly talking about a consolidation of services. But those 2 project positions, I'm not exactly sure what they cost. It'll be in the budget amendment, but whatever 2 DHS social workers cost per year. And the reason we're looking at project positions is in part because if we can run it for 2 full years, our hope is that we'll see if it's working well enough to justify doing it long term. And to try to address some of the sheriff's concerns, the sheriff and I disagree frequently and we agree frequently. There's absolutely no doubt at all that both the sheriff and myself, our primary focus is community safety. Where we end up with disagreements is sometimes how we're going to achieve community safety. But that's what we both want. We want to make our community as safe as we possibly can. And when the sheriff was speaking, and he talked about his 30 years in law enforcement, in my head I jumped and I thought, well, that's 1989. If we go back to 1989, and I think everybody on this board is aware of what happened in the 80s and 90s with criminal justice. We became the most incarcerated country in the world. Our homicide rate is 4.9% per 100,000 people compared to Europe's at 0.9. Our suicide rate is phenomenal. Our overdose deaths were 73,000 last year, compared with 8,441 in Europe. And when we have these discussions, and frankly, thank you to everybody who's having these discussions, the fact that we're talking about this so intently and so passionately means that we're all cognizant of the issues, and this really matters. Everybody recognizes where we are. But the current school of thought is, as the county exec said, he wants to see more prosecutions. He's concerned about the non-prosecutions. But the other school of thought is we need to get people out of the criminal justice system by providing the services. Now, I could fail in this program. That's possible. I might. But I'm asking for 2 years to try. Now, what we've seen in cities or in states like New York and Texas, which I suggested the county exec take a look at some of the data, is huge reductions in incarceration. And I think I told you about New York. They've closed 13 or 14 prisons. They've just about cut their incarcerated population in half. And today, you are safer in New York City than Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And if we think back to the 80s and 90s, we remember what New York looked like. So I'm always asked, how do I know this will work? how can I prove it'll work? What I'd like you to do is think about this. How could we possibly become worse than the worst? Because our current system has made us the worst in the world. We can't get lower than that. Wisconsin has been very far behind in criminal justice reform, and as Supervisor Defferding indicated, we're working on it. The governor's working on it, the legislature's working on it, and we're working on it at the local level. We may or may not get in, depending on what everybody here decides. But that's really where the split in all of this is. And to the concerns about knowing the information about who's in the programs, that is a difficult one. That exists today. We have a computer program that monitors and tracks all of our diversion participants. We've made it available to the Sheriff's Department. We have a computer program that monitors the diversion programs, and we've made it available to the Sheriff's Department. The problem is that it's another database, so they've wanted to look at it and try to figure out a different way to get the information. But that exists now. It's not a new problem that we'll develop with this program. It's a current problem with information sharing, and that's true across the board. It's something that hopefully we can resolve as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney. Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Lautenschläger, followed by Supervisor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely agree with the programming concept. I mean, I think it's great. As far as the mental health side, and I agree with the district attorney on a few things. I retired from Winnebago Mental Health after 34 years, so I worked with all the clientele, the forensic, the civils, adults, children, whatever. And I understand his dilemma when he says that we have the out-of-county residents out there that assault the staff, and then they end up going into our jails or whatever, which is true. I don't know how you can, what diversion programs you can really use to solve that problem. But the other thing is I have to dispute a little bit is on when you say that, and I agree that you should, that the county and the DA should work more with Winnebago Mental Health, but I do kind of disagree with just when their time's up, they just let them out the door, and that's not true. I mean, they make sure, because I've sat in on a lot of discharge delays or whatever, because the services, the outside services weren't hooked up with them yet. You know, so they don't just discharge them if there's no outside services or nothing with them. So I just want to kind of dispute that a little bit, you know, because they just don't open up the door and say, here you go. I mean, you're on your own. I mean, every no matter if it's a forensic or it's a civil, they do hook up. They do have to make sure that the outside services are hooked up with them before they discharge them from Winnebago. So I just want to say that. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschläger. Next speaker, Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. District Attorney Gossett, I was wondering about the lacrosse program. Do you have any information? Sheriff Mott's mentioned about the lack of participation in the program that we had. Do you have any information on lacrosse's numbers and their success rate?
They did give us the information. I did not bring it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. I know that it started out, they piloted it, it's expanded, and Supervisor Defferding went to La Crosse and saw the program. I believe they have 16 full-time staff approximately. Yeah, but I'm afraid I don't have the information on me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker, Supervisor Wingren, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here to do the budget. A long time ago, someone once told me a budget really is a set of goals with numbers attached. If you think about that, that's what we're doing today and last night. And by golly, isn't local government great? Here we are, talking in depth today, respectfully, with each other. I think that's wonderful. And I think I'm learning a great deal from my colleagues today. I appreciate all the input and the various views. Although, like, for instance, Vicki and I disagree, I think we respect each other. I know I respect her a great deal, and I learn from her. And, you know, after this is all done today or whenever, when all is said and done, Is more going to be said than done? We need to do something. What started this is the question we asked earlier this morning. It was the jail. It always comes back to the jail. Let us focus. When people are arrested, this is a key. There are two things you can do. A key, you can lock them up, or you can take the other meaning of the word key. What is the key to helping people? Those that go into the jail, and those, many of us hopefully, who are not in the jail. We want this to be a civilized society. People that do very evil things should be dealt with. People that do minor things should be dealt with. And by dealt with, I mean helped. You don't help people by throwing them in jail. From the day I got on this board, in fact, when I was running for this job in 1998, I opposed the building of the new jail. I think building jails is a waste of money. It has to be done, obviously, but this is a terrific idea. This is a terrific idea. I compliment everybody for coming up with new ideas. This is an experiment, as the DA said. Experiments are hard, and I applaud his effort because he admitted this might not work. But any great journey begins with that possibility. You might fail. But if you never try anything, we'd still be over in Spain or Italy or something, because people would have been afraid to go out into the deep, as it were, and try something new. So I think building more jail space, no. And it's because we've always done it that way. That argument really is irritating to me anyway. I think we need to step up to the plate. Let's do this experiment. As Mr. Eisen has said, there's the money there. Besides that, with all due respect, Mr. County Executive, you are the executive. Execute. If we say you want this done, do it. That's your job is, with all due respect, and you do it well. So I think it's up to this board to decide if we want to do this, we want to help people in a positive way. Is this a perfect idea? Nothing ever is. Do we have all the answers? Of course not. We don't even have all the questions. But let's begin. Let's begin the process. The key is moving forward, asking the right questions, asking tough questions, and getting the answers as we have today. And I appreciate very much, again, all of the great input this morning. When we vote on the amendment this afternoon, I hope you will favorably cast into the deep, shall we say, and do the right thing.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know why I ended up going after Mr. Wingren, because he's always so, and it would have come from Ireland, not Spain or Italy, but anyways. My question to the district attorney is, it seems like the majority that have spoken this morning is for your program. But my question to you is, it seems to fall back quite a bit on where you're located. What happens if you are not on the first floor and you are put in a different place? Do you plan to still go through with this, or are you just going to kind of say, well, maybe it'll fail?
Yeah, we've tried to figure out contingency plans, and so we're already working on this. And I think that's one of the things that I want everybody to know is this isn't something that we're not going to do if we don't get the space. We're doing everything we can right now. Some of the things that came out of this work group include text notifications for court dates. It sounds like a simple thing, but the research on it shows that we can reduce court failures to appear by 26%. Every failure to appear results, well, not every, but most of them result in an arrest and incarceration in the jail. So that's one area where we're trying to reduce them, and that's going to continue regardless of what happens with this. We've also tried to get the different organizations working together. So we had the prosecutors and all of the probation agents in the southern part of the probation district, for example, meet and talk and get to know one another and exchange contact information so we can try to not replicate services. Those are the types of things that have brought the jail population down. And we'll keep doing that. We'll keep doing that in whatever capacity we can. The hope is just to be able to make this a formal, permanent structure, so when there's turnover, there's still a mechanism in place to do that, because we're talking about, tens of people, probably 30, 40 people in the system. If we throw in the social workers and the schools, we're talking hundreds of people. So trying to have a permanent mechanism. So we're always going to do the best that we can with whatever resources we have. And I believe we've shown that, and absolutely we'll do everything we can.
So your plan is, no matter where you're at, this program will continue as you has presented to the board?
So the programs already exist, and they will continue. Again, this concept is primarily consolidating them. They already exist scattered throughout the county.
Correct.
Yeah. So we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Okay, and then I'll bring this one more question back to you. As a program, will this be underneath your direction, or who will be the head of this program?
My understanding is that every entity controls their own people. So the people from the district attorney's office will stay under the table of organization of the district attorney's office. DHS will stay under DHS. Thinking forward, if this becomes a permanent, if it looks like, or if it shows that this is working and it's having a positive impact on the community, then I think it has to come to all of you to decide. And my suggestion would be that this either becomes a part of DHS, because I think it most appropriately falls there, or in La Crosse. La Crosse, I think, is a subset of DHS. Supervisor Defferting, is that correct? So I think that's probably where it should end up, is with DHS. It could also be its own entity, a standalone entity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney, and thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great discussion, and I'm glad we're finally having it. I think local governments do need to take, the lead in criminal justice reform across our state. And I want to thank Supervisor Defferting for kind of starting this conversation by bringing this resolution forward. I had the opportunity a couple summers ago to work at the Wisconsin Resource Center, which is a mental health corrections facility, and did a lot of work in, analyzing recidivism rates, and kind of how when we actually invest in people who need it, the great results that we get. And some of the things we did see was that, recidivism rates go down when we actually do invest, in people who need that help. So I think this is a move in the right direction, and I'd like to see it happen. I think it's interesting. There seems to be a disconnect with kind of all the stakeholders, and a lot of us are just kind of finding out about this now. And last month, I suggested, it seems like the county board, we want that need. We're ready to start, looking at how we can make change and how we can have some meaningful reform. And I suggested last month that we put together some type of committee, an ad hoc committee, that specifically focuses on criminal justice reform, and that means bringing together stakeholders from the county board, from county executive, from the sheriff's office, courts, DA's office. I think it's something we need to do if we're really serious about addressing these issues in the jail and in our community. So I'd like to see that happen, but I think this is a good step in the right direction, and something that will get us moving towards that. So thank you for putting this forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Albrecht.
I move to take a 10-minute break.
There's a motion to take a recess for 10 minutes. We see no other call-ins there, so was there a second? All right, all those in favor for a 10-minute recess, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. We are in recess.
The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly.